This is a story they won't tell you on the 6 o'clock news, a story about the men society calls monsters, the outlaws, the shadows that ride the highways, doing the kind of dirty work the badge won't, or maybe can't, touch. We're talking about the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Yeah, you heard right. The patch, the chrome, the reputation that precedes them like a storm front, they are the last people you'd expect to play the hero. But sometimes when the darkness gets too deep, it takes a darker shade to chase it away. This is one of those times. This is the truth behind the rumble that shook a quiet suburban street to its core. It all started with a whisper, the kind of desperate plea that travels fast through the underground network that runs parallel to the straight-laced world. The clubs, the bars, the mechanics' shops. They hear things. Things the police dismiss as domestic disputes, things social workers can't prove, things that chill you to the bone. The intel reached Silas, known on the street as the preacher, not for any religious piety, but because when he speaks, people listen, and his words usually decide whether you're going to heaven or hell on earth. Silas is the president of the local Bandidos chapter. He's a mountain of a man, eyes that have seen too much, and a code of ethics that might bend the law but never breaks the sacred trust of protecting the vulnerable. The vulnerability, in this case, was a 12-year-old girl named Ellie. Her story was heartbreakingly familiar. A fractured home, a struggling single mother who had tragically passed away a few months prior, and a stepfather, a man named Wayne, who was the embodiment of small-town evil. Wayne was a respected figure, a deacon at the local church, a man with a clean-cut image. But behind the closed door of his meticulously maintained ranch house, Ellie was living a nightmare. She wasn't just being neglected, she was being punished, isolated, and most recently, locked away. Specifically in the dark, damp concrete basement under the house, treated like a secret too terrible to face the light of day. The source of the intel was shaky, a worried neighbor, someone who had seen glimpses of Ellie's thin frame, who had heard faint, desperate cries muffled by the floorboards. They had called the police, but without hard evidence, without a warrant, the hands of the law were tied by due process. Wayne played the grieving widower and the patient guardian perfectly. He claimed Ellie was acting out after her mother's death, that she needed firm discipline, and that she was merely grounded in her room. The law left, apologizing for the intrusion. But the neighbor knew the truth, and in their desperation, they turned to the only people who operate outside the lines where justice often stalls. They went straight to the club. Silas listened to the story with the kind of stony silence that could terrify a seasoned criminal. When the neighbor finished, Silas didn't say thank you. He just nodded once, a barely perceptible movement that meant the wheels were turning, and the time for talking was over. The decision was made. The Bandidos would intervene. This wasn't about turf wars or drug deals. This was about a child, and in the unwritten, brutal code of the club, some lines, even for outlaws, are sacred. You don't touch kids. You don't lock them up. You just don't. The mobilization was swift and silent. 40 Bandidos, not all from the local chapter, but men called in from neighboring areas, gathered at the clubhouse. They parked their bikes strategically, quietly discussing the plan. This wasn't a subtle operation. Subtle had failed. They needed a show of force, an undeniable presence that would overwhelm the system and bypass the red tape that was letting Ellie suffer. They were going to shut down the street, and they were going to get that girl out. The plan was simple, brutal, and effective, a non-negotiable roadblock. At precisely 4:30 p.m., just as the suburb was settling into the evening routine, kids playing, commuters driving home, the roar began. It wasn't just a few bikes, it was 40 Harley-Davidsons, custom choppers, and baggers, a thunderous cavalcade of iron and noise. The roar was deafening, a physical presence that vibrated through the foundation of every house. The line of bikes stretched across Elmwood Drive, forming an impenetrable steel wall directly in front of Wayne's house. The street, usually serene and quiet, was instantly transformed into a scene of organized chaos. Residents peered out their windows, their curiosity quickly turning into fear. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline, oil, and ozone. a potent cocktail that spelled trouble. Silas, flanked by two of his most trusted enforcers, Hammer and Joker, walked toward Wayne's front door. They moved with the kind of slow, deliberate menace that tells you they are completely in control, completely unfazed by the growing number of neighbors watching or the inevitable arrival of the police. Their patches, the iconic Bandidos rockers and the centerpiece logo, seemed to absorb the twilight, making them look even more imposing. Silas hit the doorbell once, a hard, sharp ring. Wayne, caught completely off guard, opened the door, a look of shocked arrogance giving way to sheer panic. He saw the bikes, the crowd, and Silas's face, a face that promised a reckoning. Wayne tried to stammer, What is this? You can't be here. I'm calling the police." Silas didn't raise his voice. His tone was low, gravelly, and infinitely more terrifying than any shout. He said only 3 words, cutting through Wayne's hysteria like a blade through silk. "The girl, Wayne." The immediate, chilling silence that followed was broken only by the continuous rumble of the idling engines, a soundtrack to imminent doom. Wayne's eyes darted nervously between Silas and the basement door, a clear admission of guilt. He had underestimated the darkness in the world, believing his own darkness could remain hidden behind a veneer of respectability. He was learning, in that moment, that the real outlaws sometimes follow a higher, harsher law. He was about to find out that when you mess with a child, you don't just deal with the law, you deal with the code of the road and the justice of the patch. The stage was set, the street was blocked, and the rescue was about to move from a standoff to a confrontation that would define the line between villainy and true heroism. This was their ride, and the only direction they were headed was down into that basement. Wayne's panic solidified into a pathetic resistance. He tried to slam the door, but Hammer's massive boot was already wedged in the frame. The sheer size and intensity of the Bandidos at the door was an overwhelming psychological weapon. They weren't there to negotiate. They were there to execute a mission. Silas pushed the door inward and Wayne stumbled back, hitting the wall. The living room, normally so prim and proper, now felt small and tainted under the presence of these men who smelled of leather, sweat, and impending violence. The air crackled with a tension that only comes when the line between order and anarchy is about to be obliterated for a just cause. "Where is she, Wayne?" Joker's voice was the complete opposite of Silas's calm depth. It was sharp, laced with genuine disgust, and high enough to send shivers. Joker didn't look like a brute. He looked like a nightmare dressed in denim and chrome, and he carried the cold confidence of a man who enjoys setting things right, no matter the cost. He didn't wait for an answer. He moved swiftly, his eyes scanning the room, landing on the small, almost hidden door tucked beside the staircase, the door to the basement. Wayne let out a desperate, wheezing sound, lunging toward the staircase, not to escape, but to defend the door, the secret. "Get out!" "You freaks! This is illegal! You'll all go to jail!" he screamed, his voice cracking. He still clung to the illusion that the system would protect him. He was tragically mistaken. The system was currently trapped outside, in the form of one patrol car that had just pulled up, lights flashing, sirens muted, blocked entirely by 40 roaring Harleys and 40 stone-faced outlaws. Silas gave a subtle hand signal to a prospect named Rook, positioned near the street. Rook, without a word, adjusted his bike's throttle, and the combined sound of the idling engines immediately ratcheted up, transforming the rumble into an aggressive, pulsing throb. It was a clear message to the police officer sitting helplessly in his cruiser. "Stay put. This is not your fight yet." The officer, a young man named Peterson, was smart enough to recognize a stalemate. 40 armed, organized men in patches against one patrol car. He radioed for backup, but he knew the cavalry would be slow, and the Bandidos had purchased themselves a window of time. Back inside, Joker simply tossed Wayne aside like a doll. Wayne slid across the hardwood floor and lay there whimpering, finally seeing the real, terrifying consequence of his actions reflected in the cold eyes of the men standing over him. Hammer, known for his methodical strength, didn't even use a tool. He simply grabbed the padlock securing the basement door and with a terrifying grunt of pure, focused force, ripped the lock clean off the frame. The wood splintered and cracked, a sound of definitive breaking. It was the sound of Ellie's captivity ending. The air that rushed out of the basement was cold, damp, and musty, a stench of neglect and stale air. Joker took a flashlight from his belt, flicked it on, and descended the rickety wooden stairs. Silas stood guard at the top, his gaze fixed on the defeated Wayne, ensuring he stayed right where he was. The moment felt suspended. Neighbors were now spilling onto their lawns, some dialing their phones, others just staring in horrified fascination. They were witnessing a clash of realities. The veneer of suburban perfection versus the raw, unvarnished justice delivered by men who live by their own laws. Down in the darkness, Joker's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Ellie, it's okay. We're here. My name's Joker. I'm a friend. You're safe now." The beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing the pathetic makeshift enclosure. A bare concrete floor, a mildewed sleeping bag in the corner, and a small, terrified figure huddled against the far wall. Ellie was frail, her eyes wide with shock and fear. But when she saw the figure towering above her, not the monster she expected, but a man with a surprisingly kind voice and a large, welcoming hand, she slowly began to move. It took time, precious minutes ticking by as the police sirens grew closer in the distance. Joker spoke to her calmly, reassuringly, telling her that they were the good guys today, that they rode loud and looked mean, but their purpose was clear. He even managed a crooked, gentle smile, which was startling on his hard-bitten face. Slowly, Ellie reached for his hand. Joker picked her up, wrapping her in his heavy, surprisingly warm leather jacket. As he carried her up the stairs, Ellie was shielded from the sight of Wayne. When she emerged into the light, blinking against the evening sun, a collective gasp went up from the watching crowd. She was malnourished and weak, but she was free. Silas immediately took over, gently carrying her the rest of the way. He walked past Wayne, looking down at the crumpled man with utter contempt, then walked directly through the open front door. The sight of Silas, the imposing leader of the outlaw gang, carrying the tiny, jacket-swallowed girl like a precious piece of cargo, silenced the entire street. The roaring bike softened slightly, a respectful lull in the thunder. The police backup finally arrived, 3 cars deep, but they found the street blocked by an impenetrable formation of motorcycles, their riders standing motionless, watching Silas. Silas walked directly to the first patrol car, Officer Peterson's vehicle. He didn't look at the officers. He looked at the bewildered, frightened girl in his arms. He spoke directly to Peterson, his voice a commanding rumble that carried over the residual noise. "This girl is Ellie. She was locked in that man's basement. Call Child Protective Services. Get her to a doctor. Now." He handed the girl, jacket and all, to the female officer who had just arrived, a woman who looked stunned, her training temporarily suspended by the sheer audacity and clear righteousness of the scene. Before any of the police could react, before the chaos could fully descend, Silas nodded to Hammer, who gave a sharp whistle. In a perfectly synchronized maneuver, the 40 bandidos threw their legs over their bikes. The thunder returned, multiplied tenfold, an overwhelming wall of sound that swallowed the police sirens and the gasps of the neighbors. As one, the line of motorcycles peeled away from Elmwood Drive. They didn't speed, they rode with a deliberate, slow dignity, their formation unbroken. They left behind a terrified criminal, a rescued child, and a suburb forced to question everything it thought it knew about good and evil. They rode off into the twilight, the sound of their engines slowly fading, leaving the street quieter, but forever changed. The bandidos vanished, but the truth remained. Sometimes, the heroes wear the darkest patches, and sometimes they have to break the law to deliver true justice.